Uh, thank you for that shout of encouragement. I just want to let everybody know that in addition to those of us who are in the room, we also have some people with us on Zoom. Michael has joined us from Toronto, and we have some folks with us from Humboldt, Saskatchewan too tonight. So those folks will not be able to hear you speak or share or do anything unless you're speaking into a mic. So when we get into all of this stuff, there's this mic, and I can run around and bring that to someone, or someone can come up and speak at the mic that's over there. Okay? So that's the way that we're going to be able to get everybody heard, and so that our online folks will be able to hear us as well. So we're very excited as a cluster to have this gathering this evening. And though I'm the newest one in the cluster of Order of Ministry folks, I have been asked to do this because this is Wesley, and I am serving here at Wesley United Church. And so welcome to Wesley United Church. It's wonderful to have all of you here. And oh, I'm Carolyn Woodall. There you go. I'm Carolyn Woodall, and I have been serving Wesley now for 1.5 years in an intentional interim ministry. And we are going to open our gathering this evening with a statement, a territory acknowledgement. And I want to acknowledge that this territory acknowledgement that we use in worship every Sunday was actually written for us by our beloved Deb, who is here with us. And so our thanks to her for these beautiful words. So, friends, the land on which we worship Territory 4 is land that has been walked on, hunted on, and lived on for thousands of years by the Nahiawak Cree, by the Naha-Winawak Saulteaux, the Lakota, the Dakota, the Nakota, and the Métis. It is with humility and respect that we give thanks that we are here in a space where we are in touch with Creator, who made it and who made us. May our worship and our time together honor the relationships that are celebrated and invited here. And may we always remember the story of the land, the people who live here, and the call to live with respect and thanksgiving. Amen. And I'm going to light the Christ candle, and I'll invite you.
Thank you, Carolyn. For those who don't know, I'm Russell Mitchell-Walker, the minister at Eastside United Church, and I invite us into prayer. Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we give you thanks for this opportunity to gather this evening as United Churches in Regina, and as we seek to find ways to explore how we may be in ministry together more than we are presently. Bless us as we move through this time. May we know your presence speaking, and moving through us. As we seek to find ways to be deep in our spirituality, bold in our discipleship, and daring in our justice, together in ministry in this place of Regina. We give thanks for your Spirit among us, moving through us. May we be open to that Spirit as we move through this time together. In honor of the Christ in and with us, we pray. Amen.
I don't know where to stand. Hi, good evening, greetings. My name's Vicki Nelson, and I am not a clergy person. I'm just a cluster keener. I love all things cluster, and I keep volunteering with the cluster because, I throw at events and I say, hey, what if we did this? What if we asked Michael Blair to talk? Because I actually really love the United Church. And full disclosure, I work for the United Church of Canada now, doing stewardship support. But if you know me, I liked the church before then. That's new. Even if it wasn't my job, I really think that the United Church of Canada, my candle went out. Well, no, it's just small. We'll see what happens. Even if it wasn't my job, I really think the United Church, through its congregations, through its camps, through its outreach ministries, through the colleges and mission and service partners, is really offering the world a lot. And I also don't believe that the best days of our denomination are behind us. I know, I've heard that it's actually a bit controversial to say that as somebody who wasn't around back in the day. But I don't know, but I suspect that there was never a time that it was a cakewalk to be an engaged participant in a community of faith. Part of Christian life is work. It's service. It's generously sharing your energy, your money, and a lot of the times part of your heart to sustain a community that gives you and others this like life and this hope and this purpose. So maybe a few summers ago, when you heard that the United Church was undertaking town halls and roundtables about the denomination we are and like where we want to grow and how we want to become, maybe you heard that and you were excited, or maybe you heard that and you were skeptical, or maybe you've never even heard that happen and that's the first you're hearing of it. But was anybody here a part of any town halls that happened to discuss the call and vision? I was there, a couple nods. Okay, a few of us were there. Awesome. So either way, even if this is all brand new to you, as a church body, all through those conversations, we have landed on this vision of deep spirituality, bold discipleship, daring justice. And I like it. It feels like, thank you so much, Carolyn. It feels like where I want to be with my community, with all of you, with United Churches across this country and in Bermuda. But I also want to be honest that those are just words, right? We can say deep spirituality, but what does it mean, daring justice? It's easy to keep doing things the same way we've always done them. And I kind of pray that through conversations like tonight, I hope that conversations tonight will get us past the status quo of just doing the thing we've always done and assuming it makes us deeper, bolder, more daring. So in a minute, I think Michael is going to talk a little bit about how the denomination is looking at those words and at that call, and how from it a strategic plan has come in that focuses on leadership and common good and growth and indigenous pathways and many other areas. I don't know. I don't want to assume what he's going to talk about, but I suspect he might. And I think a plan for the denomination is awesome, like plan for general council. But as we know, the structure of our church means that any real change comes from us, the people. We're a grassroots kind of church, right? So the people that worship on Sundays, the people that participate in camps, that's how we're going to be more deep, bold, and daring. And so after Michael's presentation, we're going to get the chance to have conversations about topics that we can really dig into together. But what a better way to preface those conversations, our town hall we're having, than through some words from the Reverend Michael Blair, who's General Secretary of the United Church of Canada. He's my boss, and he's captain of this whole crazy United Church ship. I don't actually have an authorized bio for Michael, so I hope he'll share whatever he wants you to know about himself. But I do know that Michael lives in Toronto, that he likes photography, and that a few months after I started working for the church in 2021, I heard Michael speak. It was my first chance to hear him speak, and it was via Zoom at a regional council meeting, not in Saskatchewan, a different one. And he said very clearly that he didn't want to lead a church in decline. And I remember being like, oh, gasp. How, because that's not the story I had been told or been telling myself. And so hearing him speak has shifted how I think about what we're all doing, and I hope it happens for you a bit tonight too. So I love that energy, and I want to welcome Michael. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, friends, good evening. The joy of technology. It's good to be with you this evening and to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the new call vision that is been developed, as Vicky had mentioned, through a process over the last year and a half. I want to tonight do a couple of things. I just wanted to frame the call and vision statement. I want to give you a wee bit of a background to frame it, to talk a little bit about what I think it means, or what it calls us to, and then to imagine some of the ways in which we can begin to live into that space. So I came into the United Church just after the 2006 General Council in Thunder Bay, and one of the things that have kind of sparked my imagination over the years is the document Call to Purpose that came out of that 39th General Council in Thunder Bay. And if you are familiar with it, and if you're not familiar with it, I would encourage you to look it up. But after a significant and somewhat problematic General Council, there was a word from the church to the church. And one of the things that started to ask the question was, what intent may be in the heart of God for the United Church of Canada for its third generation? And in some ways, I experienced that document as a bit of a nudging and a kind of prophetic invitation of the church to consider where it wanted to be as it eased into 2025, it celebrated its centennial. At the end of that statement, and it talked about the experience of the General Council, and then it ended with a prayer. And the prayer it ended with said, God, propel us into your future, rooted in the richness of our past. And so for me, as someone who was new coming into the United Church, it was also an invitation to think about the richness of the past of the United Church of Canada. And in many ways, you know, we have this call to deep spirituality and bold discipleship and daring justice. And we recognize that in some ways it's not new. It may be a kind of new articulation for this moment, but it is not new. I'm going to just walk you through a couple of slides and speak to those. I think I'm able to share. Okay. So I want to just walk you through this and talk to you about some of the pieces of this. So the starting point of the call is from a perspective of hope. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 12, and I have two versions on the screen. With that kind of hope to excite us, nothing holds us back. Or since then we have such a hope, we act with complete frankness. Another version talks about we act with boldness. And so it's important for us to recognize that as we kind of think about this new articulation of a call to those of us within the United Church of Canada, it is rooted in a strong sense of hope. It's the hope we have in what God is up to in the world. When we think of Men in the World, in 1997, we said that God was active in the religious life of the people of the world, and we know that God is still active. And because God is still active in the world, we act with great boldness. And so the invitation, the call to deep spirituality and bold discipleship and daring justice is rooted and lived out of a sense of hope, because of the gospel, the story that we have inherited and we've been called over the years to steward. There are a number of assumptions that has gone into imagining this new call or new articulation. I want to say it's a new articulation of a call, in language that is more contemporary than in the wordiness of all our past statements. But there are a couple of assumptions, and I'd invite you, as you move into small groups later on, to think through or to ask questions about these assumptions. Are the assumptions we've made assumptions that you can hold to, or are these assumptions something that challenge you and you'd want to challenge me? And I think after I've spoken, there's some opportunities for you to ask me a couple of questions. So the fundamental assumption that we are rooting this new call in is that God is still at work in the United Church of Canada. For me, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. God is still at work, and I can walk you across the country and highlight those moments where we see God at work, but God is still at work in the United Church of Canada. And I think as simply as the fact that so many of us are committed to making this thing work, I think is an act of God. So a fundamental assumption is that God is still at work in the life of the United Church of Canada. A second assumption is that the life and ministry of the United Church of Canada, and dare I should say the people of the United Church of Canada, is still needed in our society today. If you think of just our decisions since 1988 and the impact that has had on countless lives of people across this country and across the globe, that there is something in the DNA of who we are as the United Church of Canada. There's something about, in some ways, our ability to engage the text that creates space of liberation in the lives of individuals. And we live in the context of a time where people are hungry for community. They're hungry for ways that free them. They're hungry for ways that will engage in the reality of where we live. And I would dare say that this call to deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice is rooted in that sense that the life and witness of the United Church of Canada is still needed today. I would say it also is rooted in this assumption that the church has been invited into a process of discernment for its future. This is not necessarily unique to the United Church, but in many ways, the United Church has this opportunity for a number of factors. So one of the things that we in the United Church have to think about is, what does it mean to be the people of God in a context of seeking to live and minister in a decolonized way? How do we live in light of the fact that we and our ancestors have been part of a colonial project that has been violent, that has destroyed life and history and generations? whether it's related to the indigenous peoples of this land, whether it's part of the transatlantic slave trade. What does it mean for us to be the people of God from a perspective of decolonization? And our work through the Truth and Reconciliation, our work in terms of beginning to imagine an autonomous indigenous church within the context of the United Church, all our effort around right relations, and I'll come back to this in a few minutes, but I think the church is being invited into this place of process of discernment that dismantles the colonial project. And there's some liberation in that, and there's some fear in that, because we are accustomed to doing things in a certain way, and this moment in time invites us into that. And I think it requires a daring approach and a boldness to be able to imagine church that is not a colonized project. I think our commitment to being anti-racist is also part of that. What does it mean to be an anti-racist church? We're one of the few churches that struggle with it. And in some ways, we are in the context of, currently, in terms of at the level of general secretaries and equivalents of general secretaries and heads of denominations across the country. The United Church has a Black gay general secretary and an Indigenous woman as its public national leadership. And so what does it mean for us? It confronts us. We have to deal with it constantly about what it means to be anti-racist, because some of the systemic challenges of racism that has been part of the life of this church continues. And folks have to learn to deal with a Black man as the general secretary in ways that they never thought about. And in some ways, some of the challenges of racial stereotype and racial expectations come to play. So we are in this moment of having to think about, discern our future within that context. I think another assumption is that we're being called to humility. If you've had a chance to see the recent census that have come out of, so we've always patted ourselves on the back that we in the United Church of Canada, the United Church of Canada is the largest Protestant denomination in Canada. We still are that, but look at the numbers. We are the whitest denomination in Canada. What does that mean as we struggle with the notion of becoming an anti-racist church? And so I think we're called to a space of humility. What does ministry look like when we are no longer at the center, that we are on the margins? And I think part of the challenge for us in these days is that we're still fighting for the position of being centered, and we haven't figured out how what it means to do ministry from the marginal positions in which we find ourselves as the people of God, the United Church of Canada, in this time. And I think so this invitation about deep and bold and daring is about this notion of humility. And I think coupled with that is that we're being invited into places of collaboration and interdependency. That we have always been the strong ones to do everything, and we're finding ourselves now in places where we no longer have that strength, and we need to be in spaces of collaboration together. And I think it's important for us to understand that the ministry to which we're called um, is a ministry that is about the people outside of our buildings. And it's not about us in our buildings. And so, in some ways, so much of our time and energy is spent attending to those of us who are in the building rather than folks who are outside. A quick story. When some of you may know, I served in the Baptist church for a number of years. And part of my training was that it was critical for us as ministers and members of congregation to spend time outside the building interacting with folks. And so I think it was second pastoral charge I was in at. I moved into the neighborhood where the church was, and I was like a 4-minute walk from the church. And my intent was that I was going to spend all my time out meeting people in the community because I lived in the neighborhood. What happened was that I spent all my time dealing with issues within the four walls of the church, and I think I left that pastoral charge being absolutely deflated and wondering if it was ever possible to be in ministry where we have the focus on the outside. So my third pastoral charge after that, I came up with this notion that no member of the congregation was to spend more than 4 hours a week involved in any ministry within the walls of the church. And I monitored that. And if people were spending more than 4 hours a week within the walls, they would be invited to tea with Mike. And part of having tea with Mike is to have a conversation about the fact that if you're spending all your time within the walls, then you're not out interacting with people in the world and being able to offer the gifts and graces that are part of us as the people of God. And so we supported that by every September we commissioned everybody in the congregation was commissioned to their ministry. And we did it in terms of if you were a teacher, we would bring you up front. The elders would pray and lay hands and commission you to your ministry within the school system. If you were a stay-at-home parent, we would bring you up front, bless you, and pray, understanding that as a stay-at-home parent, you have opportunities through play groups or whatever to be in touch with people outside the walls of the church. And I think this is what this call to deep, bold, and daring is inviting us to. I put this as a question. Archbishop Mark MacDonald, who was the first Anglican Archbishop responsible for the Anglican Indigenous Church, had this notion. He would say that many of our churches, the poor can't afford our churches. And part of me wonders, with the economic challenges that we're facing, with the questions around property and all that kind of stuff, if the gift in that moment is that God is calling us to become a church the poor can afford, and what will that mean for us, and what kind of opportunities that opens up for us. So I think that's something to think about. This one is something I'm kind of putting before you. Sorry, as a bit of a question: are we becoming a church that the poor can afford, And are we missing an opportunities because we're still fighting to be what we used to be? And without recognizing that those days are gone, but it doesn't mean that our life and ministry and witness are gone. Our life and ministry and witness are just going to look differently, and we got to get our heads around that. So just further background, I think, as I started out saying, I think it's important to note that the deep, bold, and daring isn't really new. It's a new expression for us in a way, but it's all over our statements, our history, our practices, and I'm this statement from the introduction to the Song of Faith continues to remind me. And although the deep, bold, and daring is not a new statement of faith, I think the expression of it is within the seeds of this, that the church's faith is grounded in truths that are timeless. These truths, however, must be embraced anew by Christians of every generation and stated in terms of the thoughts of their own age and with emphasis their age needs. It comes from the 1940 statement. And I think the image of this deep, bold, and daring has captured the richness of our past and is expressing it in a way for today. It's not a statement of faith, but it's a way of expressing who it is that we are and who it is that we want to be as a people of God in this time, in this place, for today. And these words in some ways aren't for all times, but they're for this time, they're for the now. And so, we've ended up with this invitation around deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice, rooted, as I say, in those assumptions. And each of these carries invitation. One of the things you'll notice that we haven't really defined what we mean by this. And part of it is that we are inviting the church, we're inviting communities of faith, we're inviting regional councils, we're inviting all the various expressions of the United Church of Canada to begin to ask themselves the question, what does these words mean? What do they mean to you? And out of defining that, to begin to think about what. So a couple of things. Why deep spirituality? A couple of things. One, in the statement from 2006, the Call to Purpose, we were reminded in that statement that the need of the Spirit to engage with us as a people of God. And, in some ways, within the United Church, we have lost our capacity to think and to engage about the Spirit of God, the third person of the Trinity, and what that third person of the Trinity means for us. And so in some ways, we have kind of negated any kind of engagement. In the Song of Faith, in the section that talks about the church, it says that, the church has not always lived up to its calling, and it needs the Spirit to reorient it to the direction and the desire that God has for the people of God. And so we identify deep spirituality as about us, the capacity and the invitation to re-engage in putting our roots deep, drawing from the well of our faith through the practices of our faith. Many of you in the audience, and I'm so sorry I can't actually see who is there, and I feel like I'm talking to myself at the moment, and I'll get over it. But I remember years ago. I'm an old guy now, but I remember years ago reading an article in a magazine that was called Leadership. At the time, I come out of a bit of a evangelical tradition, and it was in the spirit of that. And this minister, who was the minister of a growing, significant church in Chicago, spent some time in a retreat center, and a part of the time in retreat center, he was talking to a spiritual director, and he in meeting with spiritual director, he just complained. He was angry, he was hurt about the people in his congregation, and she listened to him pour out his anger, his frustration, his hurt, and she says to him, it sounds to me that you feel like you are the barnyard pump, that everybody comes and they grab your handle and they're pumping away and they want water, and you resent that they're doing that to you. And she said, you need to realize that that is your calling. You're the barnyard pump. The problem is not that people come and crank your handle wanting. The problem is that your pipes aren't deep enough. And she encouraged him to think about what it means to dig deep into the bedrock of his faith as a way to enable him to sustain. And friends, I know how easy to go and do ministry out of the head or out of the book, and not out of a place of nurturing a discipline of prayer, reflection, silence, listening to God. Something I miss out of my own spiritual practice was when I was in congregational ministry, twice a year, I would go away to either a monastery or a convent for 5 to 8 days, and I often chose a silent retreat. So 5 to 8 days of no conversation, with the exception of 1 hour a day talking to a spiritual director, and just allow myself to be with God in a way, and to listen and to hear and to be nurtured and to be healed. And I think the reality for us is that whatever ministry that God is calling us to requires us to send our pipe deep, to ground ourselves in the bedrock of our faith, to engage with spirit again, and whatever that means for us. But that's something we need to think about. The concept of bold discipleship is critical because sorry, I'll stop sharing. The concept of bold discipleship is critical because, you see, friends, one of the challenges that we find ourselves in these days is that we are so obsessed with membership that we invite people to be members of our communities of faith. We don't invite people to be disciples of Jesus, who then become part of our communities. And here's a practical thing, and it's something I'm mulling over. And I think I would love us to stop talking about closing churches. And because what we do when we close churches is that we, in some ways, we disband, and the people who are quote unquote members of our churches just, most of the times when we have a church closure, a half to 60% of the folks who were part of the community end up going nowhere. They just kind of disappear, and they end up on the census as people with United Church history, but no thing. And what we do when we close churches is that we abandon communities. And I would like us to think about the fact that there are times when we cannot afford the property we have. And there's a whole debate about how we not give up our property, get rid of our properties. But what if we were to imagine that the disciples who make up Timbuktu United Church can no longer afford the property that they meet in, but those disciples are going to continue to meet. They're going to find ways to meet, to be community together, to worship, to support one another, and to engage in ministry in the community, because part of their discipleship is a call to place. And I think this notion of bold discipleship is a reminder and an invitation to us that the ministry that we are called to is not about us, is a ministry of God's love and care for the world. And that doesn't always require property to do that. And so we need to think about that. And I think then the call to dare injustice is a recognition that and the United Church has this reputation of being courageous over the years. We've been the first to do a whole bunch of things. But I think we're being called to imagine things differently. So let me just stay on the property. And this is something that has been a comment that was made in a panel that I was a part of last Sunday. And Mary Rowe, who is the CEO for the Canadian Urban Institute, wondered out loud if we would ever imagine not thinking about that properties are ours, and we, the community of faith, with the wisdom and advice of the regional council, are the ones who get to make the decision about the future of the property. And she wondered that as institutions that have experienced tax exemption, property tax exemption, whether we would consider this notion that we owe the community something, and that we would engage the community to help us think about the future of our property. Folks, that's daring. We don't think that way. We think it's all about us. My time's up, but let me end with this. Isaiah 58 is a space where I think helps me to imagine this call to deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice. Isaiah 58 verses 1 through verse 12. And in Isaiah 58, the conversation is between God and the people of God about their spiritual practice. And God intervenes and he says, look, what do I require as part of your spiritual practice? And he talks about stuff which is up our alley in the United Church of Canada, which is about taking care of the poor and the marginalized, those who are victims of violence. That's what we're called to do. That's in some ways part of the practice of our spirituality. That's how we live out of our spirituality. But it's rooted in the sense of God's activity in the world. And then it goes on to say this, that when you do that, you will be a people who will repair the foundation. What does that mean for us in terms of colonialism and the ways in which we have destroyed the relationship with the first peoples of this land? What does that mean for the ways in which we have been complicit in the transatlantic slave trade for people of African descent? You'll be ones who restore the foundation, that there's something about the spiritual practice that leads us to the kind of discipleship which is about restoring the foundation. You'll be called repairers of the breach, and you will be restorers of streets to live in. That you will be the people who rebuild community where people can thrive and hope and live and laugh. And friends, I just think that this is what we're called to. We are called to incarnate God's incredible love for this world and its people. And we do that when we spend our pipe deeps, when we understand there's something about our connection to the larger story, and being disciples, followers, rooted in a sense of a relationship with God, and that we seek to be those who repair breaches, restore foundations, and repair streets for people to live in. Thank you.
I hope you can hear everybody clapping for you, Michael. Thank you very much. And we could very much hear you and see you, even though you couldn't see and hear us. So, Vicki, go for it.
Hearded. Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Yes, we can hear you. And there's 60 smiling people. So maybe I'll take a picture and send it to you on Teams after. So Michael has agreed to take a couple questions. We have just a couple minutes, not to rush things, but I'm going to. So does anybody have something they'd like to ask of Michael while he's with us? And Carolyn's going to give you the mic, so you just got to put up your hand.
If you need the mic, put your hand up, or if you can walk to the mic, there's one up the front by Vicki.
Does anyone have? It was like a lot, right, to chew on? Oh, there's a hand up over here. Yeah, come stand up. So yeah.
Hi, Michael. Russell Mitchell Walker.
Hi, Russell.
I'm going to ask a question a little bit related to the last story that you told, and you may not, I don't know how you'll react to this, but you probably remember General Counsel, I don't know which one, a number of years ago. I presented whatever we called them at that point, proposal, resolution, petition, about churches that were closing, and the need for, it was out of a conversation I actually had with Brian McLaren when I asked him, okay, we're kind of like a church that does justice, but we're struggling. Where do you see us needing to go? And he said, all your churches that are closing, you need to allow those buildings to be used for congregations that are being kicked out of the denomination because of their support for LGBTQ folk. So that's basically what the resolution was. I had a conversation with Michael afterwards about how I was a bit of a pain because we didn't have any kind of structure for doing that. So I was just curious if that has gone anywhere, or if you know what happened with
that. It hasn't. I think, thanks for the question, Brian, and I do remember the proposal, and I do remember lots of conversation about that. I think part of it is, and I realize now, part of it is, it's what I said a little bit of it, that we tend to have the sense that we own our properties, and we have been stewards of our properties, and we've been exceptional stewards of our properties. But we don't have this, I think we've missed the energy of collaboration. So, for instance, many of us, we have a lot of immigrant congregations who are looking for spaces to meet and worship. And when they approach us, if we have the space, we don't embrace that around the ministry possibilities. We see it as a way to help us survive, and so the rental income is becomes important. And what we tend to forget is that those first generation communities are made up of people who are sometimes working 2 and 3 jobs here because they have to support their families in their home country. And, so an example, one of my partner's sister got diagnosed with cancer, and because of the medical system and stuff in the Philippines, which were his home, in the course of almost 3 months, it was $10,000 to help support that. So I think it's been part of that perspective, and in some ways there are times in which we'd rather give the building away to the YMCA or some other thing rather than collaborate with ministry. And I think the other thing is that the gift of this particular time, and I think part of the daring of this particular time, is for us to begin to reimagine how we revisit some of the decisions we've made in the past that have actually not worked towards supporting us as a whole. So a long way to answer your question, but not much has changed.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay. So, seeing none, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna explain to everybody and you what's happening. So in a moment, Cam Fraser is gonna come up and offer a bit of a bridging conversation. Michael, you're welcome to stay. That's gonna be about 5 to 10 minutes long. And then we're gonna have a break. No, then I'm gonna explain something. Then we're gonna have a break, at which point Zoom will be over. So we'll definitely say goodbye to Brenda and Michael. And then we're gonna move into non-technology time. We got flip chart and markers, people. So Michael, before you go, I just want to thank you again, and I hope you'll all join me in thanking you. It's late in Ontario, so we appreciate it. And Kiera, you can, you don't need to pin his face on the screen anymore, but maybe keep recording if that's okay.
So want to take some of the things that Michael said and think about it in terms of where we find ourselves. And even want to start with some of the words, want to offer a really brief paraphrase of the United Church's call and vision. Am I doing better, Carolyn? Perfect, thank you. So does this sound right? The United Churches in Regina aspire over the next 5 to 10 years to become bold, connected, evolving, diverse, courageous, hope-filled communities united in deep spirituality, inspiring vision, worship, and daring justice. That's actually what it says in the vision part. And that we believe that we are called in Regina to exercise deep spirituality in Regina, bold discipleship in Regina, daring justice in Regina. Do we believe that the best days of the United Church in Regina are ahead of us and not behind us? And we have heard that Michael, I don't know if he's still, Michael, apparently does not want to lead a declining church. Do we in the United Church in Regina believe that we are a church in decline? Have we perhaps fallen into a bit of a slump where that is the only story that we know to tell about ourselves? And if so, how can we reignite hope? And what in particular might we hope for? And thinking about some of the things that we've heard tonight, what if our hopes began with our hopes for outside of our buildings? Our hopes for our city, our hopes for our neighborhood, our hopes for the people who dwell there and what their lives might be like. And what then do we do as the United Churches of Regina with all of that? And I want to think of Michael's assumptions. One of the assumptions, and to then personalize it for us here, one of the assumptions is that God is still at work in the United Church in Regina. So us who are in this room, the congregations and the communities of faith that we represent, both here and just on the outskirts of town. And I think we've got some valid evidence for that. If folks were a part of the shared worship service in October, you might remember that 175 people showed up on the first Saskatchewan snowstorm of the year. That's not a small thing. And also, for some reason, 60 people gave up their Friday nights to come here. 60, yes. 60 movies are not watched. 60 Netflix series are not being streamed. 60 pizzas are not being eaten, although maybe you've got time to do some of that afterward. And I think 65. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking Humboldt, maybe still eating a pizza. Yeah. Amazing. And I think that some of what Vicky said at the beginning about loving the United Church and being convinced that there is something here for us has something to do with that. The second assumption was that the life and the witness of the United Church in Regina is still needed in Regina. And I was thinking when Michael was saying that about a few things. Over the last year, I have seen United Church people speak at City Hall, speak passionately about the need for a bylaw locally to ban conversion therapy. People spoke boldly, clearly, and directly about that. People spoke boldly, clearly, and directly, United Church people, about the need for City Council to approve the proposal that the former Zion United Church be converted into supportive housing for people who desperately need it. People spoke really boldly, and some people got nasty questions from city councilors and really spoke boldly in response to that. United Church people spoke boldly and courageously about the need for the city to enact its plan to end homelessness. United Church people exercised their life and witness by walking in a large group in the Queen City Pride Parade. And those who couldn't walk in the parade stood in front of a gigantic sign that said, "Queer love is a divine gift and trans people are sacred," and waved and smiled and then put a little shelter together down at the park and offered glitter blessings to people who came by. And the look on people's faces that church people wanted to talk to them, look them in the eye, and place glitter on their foreheads, and to tell them something like, "Just as you are, you embody God's glory, and the world is a better place because you're part of it." I've seen United Church people pack 200 bagged lunches on a Saturday morning and hand them out at a Baptist church. And I thought that might get a couple of chuckles. And then saying that would get more, so thank you for confirming my suspicions. And I saw United Church people gather under wonderful, insightful leadership to celebrate a feast, celebrating ways in which reconciliation has happened within our United Church communities in front of the Royal Saskatchewan Museum. And so we are being asked to think humbly. We are being asked, I think, to take a good, honest look at our current situation. And a real big takeaway is our current collective reality of our properties, of our budgets, of our methods of doing things, a church that the poor can afford? And if not, how do we use these resources and these hopes and these calls to do things? The rest of this evening is going to be spent thinking about different areas of ministry. Things like houselessness, spirituality, worship, reconciliation, children and youth. An exhaustive list will come shortly. And maybe we could ask ourselves, where do these areas need our witness, collectively and personally? Where is God at work in these areas? Where are we being commissioned, both we and the rest of the people we represent, into ministry outside of our buildings? Where might God be offering us that healing and rejuvenating of pipes going deeper that Michael spoke about so beautifully? Where do these areas call us to depth, to boldness, and to daring? And that final stuff from Isaiah. Where is God longing to restore and repair this community? Can Regina be a place where people thrive, live, hope, and laugh? And what do we owe our community to help make that an embodied reality? And perhaps these are the things that we are invited to think about as we seek to be bold, daring, and deep.